that I didn't agree with much of her research findings, but she was just so comfortable to be around in conversation.
Well, those are just two of the names, and Len Stringfield, for those people that know him already because of Coast to Coast, can relate to what Bill McDonald's been talking about. We'll get a few more minutes on Dr. Turner coming up, too, here in just a second. And then I'll just ask you about some of the other developments in ufology of recent, some of the other things that Bill is working on. We'll get to that coming up on Coast to Coast AM on the Premier Radio Networks. So we were talking about Dr. Carla Turner before we went to the break, and we'll come back to this subject because it's just part of what we're doing with Bill McDonald. We're talking about the legends of ufology, those who have gone, and the contributions they made, what they were famous for, what they did that made a difference, and what they all have in common. What are some of the themes running through their life, some of the things that they did, or better, for the purposes of this conversation, too, on this Memorial Day weekend, how did they die? Because there's an interesting relationship to that between all of these biographies. It's how they all end that perhaps ties them together the closest. Next on Coast to Coast AM, in for Art Bell on the Premier Radio Networks. Talking with Bill McDonald about the legends of ufology. We were just talking about Carla Turner. What was her nickname, Candy?
Absolutely. She was Candy to those who knew her and loved her the best.
So what was she most famous for? What was the thing that she looked back on, or those cases, maybe plural, that she took the most pride in?
Her multitude of cases led her into one overwhelming conclusion, and that was that the abduction scenario with the gray aliens and the hive-like utilitarian component of the way in which aliens abduct people, the way in which they carry out the medical experiments, the way in which they basically dissect living beings, put them back together, and the way in which they wrought a lot of emotional damage from these abductees. She felt these were screen memories, that there was something far more nefarious, far more horrible, and far more hidden, that the gray aliens and the amphibian-style aliens that were described by Len Stringfield regarding the Roswell flight crew, and the kind of compassionate glow-white type of aliens, which are these glowing beings that seem to be able to communicate warmth and compassion and emotion, as opposed to what the Greys were able to convey to the abductees. She felt that these were all screen memories that were implanted in people to hide a far more nefarious and dangerous truth.
And by this you mean kind of a smokescreen memory, sort of.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so, what could she prove that? Was she able to get behind these cover stories, if you will? Because I mean, you would think that if they were going to be given a cover story by the aliens, they'd give them a story that had nothing to do with aliens at all. That if they were going to implant a memory, it would be that they went to Disney World and they had an e-ticket ride or something. I mean, why give them half a story to work with?
She felt that if it was too child-friendly or whatever like that, it would be seen through. She felt that humans possessed qualities that they lacked, but she felt that there was an underlying intelligence. There was a higher intelligence. There were times when she felt like it was a network of beings and times when she felt like it was a single agency that wanted something from us down, deep down in the soul, deep down in our ability to convey feelings, our ability to experience things in a spiritual level. She felt like it wanted to take something from the human race, maybe without giving something back in return.
Are those the qualities, the spiritual qualities? I mean, what qualities did they lack, did she think?
She wasn't sure. The screen memories were falling into specific patterns and trends, and she was trying to break through that. She was using a variety of techniques to help people reconstruct their memories, to help them recover from the trauma that this experience created. The trauma was very much akin to rape, but she felt there was a spiritual rape going on. She felt that there was a metaphysical rape trauma being carried out in a profoundly negative way. She felt that if they could harvest something from us and leave an empty shell behind, even if it destroyed the species, that it would do it with impunity.
You know, have you ever seen the movie The Forgotten?
Oh gosh,
it just came out a couple years ago, but I'm gonna spoil the movie for anybody who hasn't seen it yet. So if you don't want to hear the end of the movie, turn away now. But the premise of that movie was that aliens were fascinated by the connection between parents and children. It's something they couldn't relate to. And that was just this ongoing alien experiment to try to figure out the bond that exists between generations. And I thought that was such an intriguing idea. I mean, I don't know how well they did it as a movie. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't terribly critically acclaimed.
If I'm interpreting what Carla told me correctly, she was very much concerned at what they were trying to do regarding manipulating our ability to not only commune with each other, but commune with our higher spiritual self. She felt that there was something, she didn't like using demonic or diabolistic terms, but she felt that there was something inherently evil, negative, and parasitical in the overall agenda that was going on behind the scenes. And she conveyed to me, and of course I never met Dr. Valet or anything, but she conveyed to me that people like him were also starting to fall into that same idea that these gray aliens are like puppets. They are intended to be a screen memory to hide a truly terrible, damaging experience going on behind the scenes.
And how did she die?
Carla had liver cancer, and it's an amazing story. She was supposed to come to our wedding, and she had promised me in January that she was going to dance at our wedding, and our wedding was scheduled for February 14th. And she died 9 days later on the 9th of January. Now, she had told me if for any reason she didn't make the wedding because of her illness, that a bird that she loved, the seagulls, and you have to remember, this is very strange because she lives in the backwoods of Arkansas, rural Arkansas, but she had an affinity for Jonathan Livingston's seagull. She loved them. She just couldn't get enough of the seagulls on the California coast. And she told me that if for any reason she didn't make that wedding, when we went out on that boat, there'd be an extra friendly, extra not skittish, extra inquisitive, and a very large gull that would cruise alongside our boat. And when the wedding day came, it was very foggy with sun patches. It was like going out and getting married in the Bermuda Triangle. And we were running a 3-point compass course in an 82-foot all-wood beautiful schooner by the name of the Kelpie. And she couldn't make the wedding. She had died on January 9th, and February 14th came along. And we were out in that fog and those sun patches, and all of a sudden the biggest mature gull that I had ever seen came right over the starboard gunwale. Its wings literally, almost brushing us. It was cruising along at an amazingly slow speed. I couldn't believe that it could maintain its, level flight at such a slow speed, but it was. It looked right at us. It stayed put around the boat. It circled the boat a few times, almost for 3 minutes, and then it disappeared into the fog, just like Carla had predicted would happen if she couldn't make the wedding. But she had sworn that if she had any say about it, she was going to dance at our wedding.
Well, the bird had to do that for her. But that brings to an interesting observation that I think I catch you making here on the number of famous UFO researchers who die of a type of cancer?
I thought there was a major issue there for the longest time until I found out a basic fact of life. Americans, especially even men, are living longer than ever before. The human body pretty much starts wearing out at the age of 40. I'm living proof of that. The people who are living into their 60s, their 70s, their 80s, and their 90s, when they die of natural causes, half the time it's some form of cancer or other. A lot of these ufologists were smokers, and therefore the incidence of lung cancer was very high among the ufologists because they were smokers. I don't think there's a conspiracy. I don't think there's anybody running around irradiating ufologists so that they get cancer. But I do know that old folks die from cancer as the source of their natural causes 50% of the time. And the older they get, the more likely they're going to get some kind of cancer or other.
But some of these people that you talk about, that you have written about, they have that's still a very similar theme to their life. They had a brilliant career, and then they get cancer, and then they're gone too soon.
Absolutely.
Can you give us another example of that?
Oh, absolutely. Len Stringfield was dying of lung cancer, and he was literally choking to death, as he was talking to me. And I spoke to him the last time just 8 hours before he passed away, and he was in pain, and he had trouble breathing.
Right.
And at the same time, unbeknownst to all of us, Kevin Randle's mother was dying of lung cancer in Las Vegas, and she passed away 1 week after Len. This is during the Christmas holidays of 1994, by the way. Len died on the 18th. Kevin's mom died, I believe, on the 24th. I could be wrong, but I think the dates are correct there.
We'll take your word for it.
Yes. Frank Kaufman, who everybody thinks is a notorious liar.
Why?
Because he fudged a lot of information regarding his background. He was caught basically forging documents related to his career in the United States Army Counterintelligence Corps, the whole thing like that. The problem was that when it came to the configuration of the spacecraft, and again, the amphibious characteristics of the flight crew, he stopped fudging. And the information that he conveyed to Kevin Randle in 1989 and to me in 1995 through 2002 was identical to the same information that Kelly Johnson was conveying to John Andrews and to Ben Rich at the Skunk Works back from 1983 through 1986. And as it turns out, a number of my informants at the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, who were connected to the CEOs of the company, had access to the information regarding the configuration of the Roswell spacecraft. It was basically bioorganic in shape, even though it was made of composited metal crystals. It had inward canted fins like the Have Blue prototype for the F-117 Stealth. It looked a lot like some of the other top-secret spy planes that have been fielded since. The wing camber to fuselage blending that you see in such airplanes as the SR-71 were inspired from the Roswell spacecraft. The flight crew looked like little Asian children, looked like little bald Mongolian or Filipino children with Asian-style eyes. But under the microscope, their skin was a screen mesh. It was not the semi-permeable tissue that you and I have. And that holds our bodily fluids in and keeps necrotic bacteria from causing us to rot while we're still alive. That's what semi-permeable tissue means. The Roswell aliens had a fine screen mesh. If they stepped outside of their spaceship onto the ground, their body fluids would start leaking through their skin immediately. They'd leak like sieves, and decay would start, in on their bodies immediately. They had absolutely no way to protect them from infectious materials. The ballast and the life support system of the Roswell spaceship was a fluid, something related to a fluorocarbon, an oxygenated fluorocarbon with water, similar to what 3M manufactured experimentally for routinely drowning Navy SEALs in this fluid over and over again for deep diving experiments. The weight of this fluid provided the ballast that allowed the Roswell ship to maneuver in the same way as a normal aircraft in atmospheric and oceanic environments, because it could also dive into the ocean and be just slightly positive of neutral buoyancy in salt water. And it could fly out again using a magneto-aeroelectrodynamic propulsion wherein the skin of the ship was its engine. And Frank Kaufman described these aliens the same way that Len Stringfield did, and Frank Kaufman described the spacecraft the same way that the Wright-Patterson witness did, the same way that the Skunk Works witnesses described it to each other and later on to me, independently of the United States Army Counterintelligence Corps witnesses. And even though some of these witnesses were discredited in the manner in which they tried to create false proofs for their background, the manner in which they conveyed information regarding what the spaceship looked like from different angles and what the flight crew looked like was without blemish. And Frank died a horrible death from his combination of liver, lung, and pancreatic cancers. In pain, in agony, refusing to take the medication during the last 36 hours of his life, gritting it out.
But that's all of that was just to make the point that he was discredited for fudging some material which he had gotten from other people, or that he was
having to do with his own background. Kevin Randall and Mark Roediger did a huge expose on some of Frank's documents that he'd provided regarding, his military service and that sort of thing.
Proved that he was a forger.
Absolutely. The problem is that the forgery techniques that these guys were trained in the 1940s, don't work so good, in the 1980s, 90s. The other thing is that Frank played games with Kevin. He played games with Don Schmidt. He played games with a lot of people. But my approach to the Roswell case was different from every other researcher, from Linda Moulton Howe and Kent Jeffries to Kevin Randall, Don Schmidt, and Stan Friedman. They focused on the backgrounds of a lot of the witnesses. They focused on proving that these people were who they said they were so that they had the right to describe the spaceship. I had a very simple method. You had 28 different witnesses scattered around the country who were still alive, including 5 or 6 primary witnesses who claimed to be either counterintelligence corps or connected with Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. If they were all describing the same spaceship, and if they had never met or hadn't seen each other in 50 years, the vehicle they described should be the same. If I got multiple configurations and multiple disk shapes and different things, then I would know that some of them or all of them were lying. The opposite was the case. I ended up with an aerodynamic vehicle that looked like a Stingray, that looked a lot like some of the miniature versions of some of the stealth aircraft and some of the top-secret spy planes that were coming out of the Skunk Works, including the top-secret F-19 that still hasn't been announced and released by the United States government, and some of the concept prototypes that became the F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter, and some of the aircraft configurations that became the B-2 stealth bomber. These people described the Roswell ship from various perspectives because, they saw it glancingly, or they saw it, when it was on a flatbed truck, or they saw it crumpled up and embedded in the side of a cliff, or they saw it in the hangar temporarily before it was taken away. And remarkably, the descriptions all dovetailed beautifully. The thing even had a tailpipe in the back that's like the stubby nub that you see on a bat ray at SeaWorld when something's bit its tail off. Well, and over and over and over again, the twin inward canted fin configurations, and something that looks like a cockpit canopy only shoved way forward. All of them describe the same vehicle.
Well, we'll come back to this with Bill McDonald coming up. I want to ask about his Oasis Earth hypothesis. And let's give the numbers, too, so other people can join in the conversation. We'll shoot you all the numbers you need to join us coming up next with Bill McDonald on Coast to Coast AM. And I'll be back to my regular show, Coast to Coast Live, I think, as of next week. But I think I said that last week, too, so you never know on the show. Art, we're waiting for your call. Look forward to getting Art Bell back on Coast to Coast AM. Bill McDonald was last on with George Norrie about a year ago, and he was talking about his Oasis Earth hypothesis. That's his book. We'll wrap that up if you haven't heard about it, just to make sure that you're up to speed on Bill, and then look forward to your questions and comments about the legends of ufology next on Coast to Coast AM. In for Art Bell, this is Ian Punnett. Got a lot of calls coming in for Bill McDonald, and I'll get to those in just a minute. Give me the thumbnail on the Oasis Earth hypothesis, because I missed that show with George Norrie.
Okay, well, basically, I've written 2 manuscripts which are currently being revised, and they're like a matched volume set. The Oasis Earth hypothesis is my general assessment of the nature of the alien presence on Earth. Primarily, I believe that there are multiple species existing as factions in different combinations, and that they ranch specific populations of humans on this planet in a manner that's similar to the way the cattle barons of the 1880s ranched North America and Australia. And it's my opinion that the majority, but not 100%, of the alien presence on Earth can be considered hostile because they're benefiting themselves without much regard to benefiting us. And it is my opinion that they are like Bedouins in space, and that they have stellar routes within local or known space, to coin a Larry Niven term, and that they harvest from humans genetic materials that they need in order to replicate themselves in a process which is more complex than cloning, in order to keep their species or multiple species viable for longer than what nature intended.
All right, so when you say that they have like the cattle barons, that is to say, so one group of aliens, you believe, has the Montana fields, or the northern Midwest or southwestern United States. So they break them up by regions, and they aren't competing with each other, that they sort of come to some sort of gentleman's agreement?
Well, they tend to bicker, and there are reports of conflicts among them that I have, in my research, found to be noteworthy. I would say that it's more like certain populations in Malaysia grow to one group, certain populations in Brazil go to another group, certain populations in Mexico and the Latin countries go to another group. With North America, Europe, Africa, those kind of populations being a little less ranched. I believe that...
Who might I have in the upper Midwest here in Minnesota ranching this area?
Well, again, I can't identify specific groups. I mean, I just go with the information, and where it stops, I stop.
Well, okay, but what information leads you to believe that there's ranching going on?
It's my overall impression and assessment of patterns and trends in abductions and other people's abduction research over the last 14 years has led me to a conclusion. And it is an opinion and nothing more than that, and that's why it's called the Oasis Earth hypothesis, because there's certainly no way to test it as a theory. But I believe that certain populations and family lines are ranched by certain alien groups that like that particular bloodline and are using it to assist in their own reproduction. There's very, very good research that in North America, including Montana and areas like that, people who have a mixed heritage of Irish and Native American descent are ideal candidates for abduction. The type of people that are most often abducted, based on my research, are people of mixed races who live in such places as Malaysia and Brazil and Mexico, because they have a wider and deeper gene pool than people from Northern Europe or Central Africa, who are more populational and genetic specific to their specific indigenous population.
Lots of people hanging on for Bill McDonald. Let's go to Mark on the international line on Coast to Coast AM. Mark?
Hello.
You're talking with Bill McDonald. Go ahead.
Thank you. You had mentioned earlier that you had seen, you had heard these witnesses describe the same craft overall. But, the thing is that if these people were there, they would have known details, and they would have described the same details, the same colors, the same textures, the same, more than just the overall craft.
They did. They did.
Okay.
And with those details, I was able to make the tester model kit of the Roswell UFO and 27 different drawings, which are, available as thumbnails on my website and are available for people who want to purchase them. I've spent, since 1995 until today, improving and refining my general composite of the Roswell Aerospace Interplanetary Skiff. The thing is a little skiff compared to other configurations and other classes of UFO, alien space, time, and dimensional craft.
Let me ask you, Bill, what percentage of doubt do you have about Roswell having never happened? I mean, how certain are you?
Absolutely outstanding question. All detectives are supposed to approach the investigation of an event with the idea that it never happened, or the investigation of people with the idea that they're not being honest. And you go through every possible means to show disharmony, discord, or to disprove various trends in testimony. And it's very easy to catch people in lies, and it's very easy to catch information that's trending in a variety of directions. With the Roswell case, we have a situation where myself and the other Roswell researchers of note who have been on Coast to Coast could prepare a case in federal court and, by a preponderance of the evidence, present it as either a legal inquest or as a lawsuit. And we could demonstrate by a preponderance of the evidence, by 50% or more to a jury, and we could convince that jury that the crash of a craft not of this world occurred on the 4th of July of 1947, and that the government covered it up, and that UFOs of various types and configurations and multiple alien species, in excess of 11, exist.
Okay, so you would say 100%? That there's, no doubt that this happened?
I'm saying that by a preponderance of the evidence, I'm very confident in the Roswell case. I'm extremely confident in it. I was not there. I only have the word of the people I spoke with and my physical walking of the purported sites, many years later, 1995, 96, 97, 99. I was not there in 1947. I wasn't born until 1962. There's no way that I can absolutely prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt. But I have faith in the case because the quality and the pedigree of the witnesses exceeds my best expectations as a private investigator.
Fred on the wild card line for Bill McDonald on Coast to Coast AM. Go ahead, Fred.
Yes, Mr. McDonald, I'd like to offer an alternative explanation for the Roswell case, and that is that it was associated with something called Project Mogul, with which I'm sure you're acquainted.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And I'm interested in knowing what you think about that explanation and the work of Carl Flock in his book, Inconvenient Facts in the Will to Believe, that really put forth what I think is a very convincing explanation for Roswell being associated with not a UFO or an extraterrestrial craft, but rather a top-secret military attempt to find out whether the Russians had an atomic bomb and were testing it in the atmosphere.
Well, I have several answers to that. First of all, Carl Flock, to the best of my understanding of the material that he's written, also attempted to approach the case as a good detective. And Carl Flock came up with an alternative scenario that, when you first look at it, does make sense to a lot of people. The problem is that my witnesses come from the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and from the United States Army Counterintelligence Corps, and they have described amounts of rigid debris and an intact, though crumpled, aerodynamic hull form, which exceeds the amount of rigid materials that would have been in a Mogul balloon. And there is nowhere near enough of the softer balloon-like material, like the mylars and the other materials that would have gone into the gas bag portion of the balloons. And they were multiple balloons. It wasn't a single balloon. There were multiple gas bags in association with the packages of instrumentation that were carried aloft at extremely high altitudes in order to detect radiation from atomic weapons that might have been exploded over in the Asian continent. The problem is that the materials just don't match what the witnesses are describing. The witnesses are describing smart metals that when you crumple them up, they pop back into their original shape. They're describing materials which superficially resemble bakelite, but when examined closely, have an electrical resistance on par with about 99.99% of all electrical, meaning that whatever that material is, it would encase a crew cabin, preventing radiation from the exterior hull of the vehicle to cook the interior occupants. The type of propulsion described regarding the Roswell ship and other UFOs of all different types and configurations leads us to understand that there must be a residual amount of microwave radiation coming off the skins of these craft when they're in operation. And it's enough to cook anything inside, like putting a hamster in a microwave. So there had to be a material that would have shielded the interior of the crew cabin from the exterior hull, which was, for all intents and purposes, the engine.
Okay. Only because, for the interest of time, we just have a lot of people who are trying to get through. So, just in short, then you don't have a lot of faith in the Mogul argument.
I don't think there was anything dishonest or disreputable about Mr. Flock. I just feel that his scenario was an excellent attempt, but that it failed to convey the facts of the case appropriately.
Daniel, east of the Rockies on Coast to Coast AM for Bill McDonald. Daniel?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Great show.
Thank you.
My question is actually a short two-part question. First of all, I've read several books where there are multiple, I guess, alien species, I guess some kind of confederation. What I got out of it was, like, I guess the Greys were of a lower stock, of a subservient race, and of the higher hierarchy were like the Nords and the reptilian humanoid race. Also, on another thought, what are your thoughts on that? Not necessarily all aliens are extraterrestrial, but some of them may be coming from actually inner Earth, from inside the Earth.
Where are you at that, Bill?
Okay, I do not subscribe to the hollow Earth theory at all. All evidence shows that the Earth has a solid inner core and a hyper hot outer core, and then a mantle and then a rather thin, proportionally crust for which the continents float on. And the hollow Earth theory just doesn't hold water with me. I don't consider it in any way, shape, or form. When it comes to looking at trends in the descriptions of aliens, there is that level that researchers look at from the forensics perspective, which is what I try to convey. Then there is the journalistic level, which many other writers take when they're examining and espousing their opinions on the different alien species. And then there's the opinions that are quite popular in the popular culture, which is, the greater portion of the UFO community. That is the community of people throughout the world that have an interest in this subject to varying degrees.
So
I don't go with all the confederations and all that other stuff simply because I have no proof.
Okay. Mike is on the wild card line for Bill McDonald on Coast to Coast AM. Mike?
Yeah, how you doing? This is Mike from New York.
Oh, Mike, this is not Mike from New York. This is the same guy who keeps calling all the time. Would you stop that? Would you stop pretending you're different people? It's just so pathetic. We know it's you every time. It doesn't matter whether you call yourself Jeffrey or Sam or Mike. It's the same thing. We know it's you. Stop it. Get a life.
Or at least learn how to change your voice a little better.
Yeah, it's just every week, every show, every time you can get on. You got to get some help, brother. There's somebody there in your community center, somebody, look for the Lutheran Social Services or Jewish Community Services or somebody who's going to be able to help you get over this need to be on the radio.
Listen, Ian,
every night.
Ian, this guy's problem is he just probably doesn't have a girlfriend.
Well, I don't know what it is, but it's every time, and it's a different name, and he's not fooling anybody. He keeps promising he's going to stop, but he cannot stop himself. All right, last caller, Karen, west of the Rockies for Bill McDonald. Go ahead, Karen.
Hi, I'm from Idaho, and I had a fully conscious contact with the Greys back in 2000. And then in 2001, July 17th, I had an aneurysm, or what they thought was an aneurysm. But then the doctors were just astounded. I didn't have any kind of surgery, and it's just been unexplainable.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about your aneurysm, and you believe that that's related to your previous experience.
Yes.
How did the doctors respond to that theory?
I didn't tell them anything about the alien contact.
Okay. Bill?
Well, first of all, I love hearing these kind of reports and stories. I have a lot of people who have told me very similar things, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And while I don't claim to know everything there is to know about these types of abduction experiences, I'm very, very happy that this lady called in. I would like to request that she put the information in writing and email it to us at alienUFOart.com because we do take reports, and we need to know the times and the dates and, when the events occurred, because we can go through my timeline project and we can actually look at and see if other UFO cases occurred in the same region during the same general time frame.
I think that would be very helpful, and that's a general invitation to everybody out there, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Like Peter Davenport, I collect data on UFO cases, and I've assembled it on a timeline, Ian, and I hope we get a chance to talk about this during the next hour. Hal Puthoff actually got me a computer and funding to work on a chronology timeline that, oh, by the way, I inserted all of the major UFO cases from all of the best investigators, and I found that they tend to cluster around each other.
All right, coming up on the end of the hour here, Bill, this is Coast to Coast AM. Sorry, Frank. That had to have woken you up. Sorry. All right, so two more callers for Bill McDonald, who's been kind enough to hang on here. In fact, Bill, you wanted to wrap up what you were just saying before the top of the hour, too? In
addition to my sitting down with various witnesses of all different kinds of UFO craft and witnesses to various types of alien species, another thing that I do is I have put together a timeline project that is financed by the Arlington Institute out of Alexandria, Virginia. This was a very gracious research grant that was put out at the behest of Dr. Hal Puthoff, who many guests on this program refer to Hal's research and his wisdom in many areas of science. I basically have put together a timeline of all of human history with both the secular and the religious dates included in an exact chronological order that I refer to, not just for paranormal cases, but for anything related to my studies of the essence of who we are as a species. And it goes all the way back to the dawn of our evolution.
And this is on the website?
The proposal for it is on the website.
Okay.
This is a private project. It began as a Microsoft Word document. We're slowly converting it to a search engine. And it is just an amazing timeline of a combined chronology of all the chronologies throughout history, globally, every culture, so that you can tell at any time in history who was concurrent with whom and what.
Okay. Let's go to the last of the callers, and then we'll go open lines for the rest of the hour. You can link up to Bill's website through coasttocoastam.com, or Bill, you want to give your website again?
Absolutely. First of all, my wife and I operate www.alienUFOart.com. It's all one word, ALIENUFOART. We have email buttons all over the site. People who want to give reports, people who want to ask questions, or people who want to purchase any of my wife's metaphysical products and services, aqua auras and crystal jewelry and that sort of thing, they can get a hold of her or they can get a hold of me directly through the website. The other thing is we have an original piece of artwork which has been featured on the Coast to Coast website tonight, and it's been put up for auction, and that is an original, and I never sell my originals.
Okay.
And it's original of one of these hybrids, because a lot of people know me for my research into hybrids, which was inspired again by Carla Turner, who was profoundly disturbed by the entire hybrid process. I also have to offer thanks to Mark Williams, who is thehostpros.com. He carries our website, and he's taken care of us through thick and thin. And we wouldn't be here without him, just like we wouldn't be here without Coast to Coast, because Coast to Coast has been our bread and butter since 1998.
Sure. Well, we're happy to help. Let's go Nick on the wild card line on Coast to Coast AM for Bill McDonald. Go ahead, Nick.
Yes, this is an excellent program, one of the best.
Glad you're enjoying it.
Very long time. Just real quick, and I'll listen off the air. I heard it on this show, but I don't remember who was the author, that the theory that the small mongoloid or dwarfian types found in the original Roswell crashes were actually Japanese captives tested with a mesh-type covering for space program to survive in space, and that some of them were discovered without debris fields that they'd fallen out of balloons. Also touch on crop circles if you can for a moment. Thank you again. I'll listen off the air.
Thank you, Nick. What about the Japanese POW
okay,
theory?
That's another one of those pop culture interpretations to the testimony that Leonard Stringfield provided to Kevin Randall and later to me. It's absolutely unfounded. That's about as welcome an idea as the idea that it was monkeys that had all their hair burned off in the crash. Absolutely unfounded. There's no proof of that. And we certainly, the U.S. government did not use Japanese prisoners for things, even though Japanese did use American prisoners for some rather hideous experiments during the Second World War.
I mean, I think most people would recognize somebody who is Japanese. It wasn't that exotic to see somebody who was Japanese.
Right, but you have to remember, the Roswell aliens were not gray aliens. The Roswell aliens looked like little Asian children, especially of the Filipino or Mongolian persuasion, but under the microscope, the skin looked like screen mesh, and they had to live in a fluid environment, like those African frogs that you see in fish tanks that can't leave the water without dehydrating.
Okay.
Now, as regards to crop circles, the Timeline Project found an amazing correlation between a number of famous UFO cases, including the Phoenix Lights, and a number of portal events, including the goings-on at what is known as the Sherman Ranch, a.k.a. the Bigelow Ranch near Fort Duchesne in Utah, where all the weird happenings were going on that was being investigated by NIDS for a number of years, and crop circles that were forming in some places as close as Laguna Beach, California, and some places as far away as Saskatchewan in Canada. And there is a process, and I've discussed this with Hal Puthoff, that goes on inside the planet where some kind of electromagnetic forces jump around like the electrical grid that you see in the gift stores, and you put your finger on it and a plasma stream runs to where your finger is. Otherwise, it's dancing around the edge of a circle in a certain way. Mm-hmm. I'm starting to think that crop circle phenomena, portal phenomena, which is the opening of a dimensional doorway where things crawl through into areas that are either cursed or worshipped by Native Americans or other indigenous cultures like the Australian Aborigines. Wherever that stuff happens, sometimes there's UFO cases happening in nearby regions at the exact same time, the same night. And the night of the Phoenix Lights case, which was 4 nights, the last night when the giant boomerang thing came over Phoenix, there was some very bizarre phenomena going on at the Sherman Ranch, and there were crop circles forming in both England and Canada.
Okay,
and that's what I know about crop circles.
Keith, east of the Rockies, on Coast to Coast AM for Bill McDonald. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, hi, Ian. I haven't talked to you in years. I do not believe in the Roswell story, and I wanted to give my reasons why.
Okay, if you can give them briefly, go ahead.
Okay, there's no photographic evidence whatsoever in existence from the amount of people who claim to witness it. Not one photo of any bodies or wreckage. 2, everyone who claims to have seen it, it's always the nephew or the cousin of the guy who's seen it. And I think New Mexico is just profiting off of a farce. It didn't happen.
What would you say to that?
One more is the UFO autopsy.
Okay, well, the alien autopsy has been admitted as a hoax, and myself and my colleagues always thought it was a hoax, so we'll take that one off the table immediately. Secondly, my witnesses are members of the United States Army Counterintelligence Corps, which was a top-secret spy agency that existed concurrently and separately from what Wild Bill Donovan was doing with his spy agency during the Second World War in the German theater. The other thing is my other witnesses are from Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. Now, these people have pedigrees that are beyond question. They have no reason to lie. In regards to the removal and the suppression of evidence, that's very easy to accomplish, especially in the old days when everything was hard copy. It's harder to do now when you have things on the Internet and when you have things that are electronic. But in the old days, erasing evidence, erasing records, erasing documents, and compiling them somewhere in a secret silo or a secret location was a very easy thing to accomplish. And then all you had to do was appeal to people's patriotism or scare them into keeping their mouths shut. It's a very easy thing to do back then.
So I guess we could say, though, to make the point, I mean, if they don't intend to lie, it is possible, and we do know this is part of human nature, that sometimes people who are telling their own truth and are telling their own truth truthfully are still factually wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. I mean, so they could have no intention of lying, but still passing along something which is not true. And we see that in the case of people who testify in court cases, and they're not perjuring themselves, but they get the information wrong. They identify the wrong suspect. They do it with the right intent. They're just wrong.
That is absolutely correct. If you believe what you are telling to another person, you are speaking the truth, even if it's absolutely wrong, even if your interpretation of what you've observed is and has been processed through your brain, even if it is wrong in reality, if you believe it, you are speaking the truth.
Okay. Well,
a lie is an intentional telling of an untruth.
Well, I get that. So I'm just saying, so the people that you have interviewed, they may have no intent of lying. It's still possible that they don't have their facts straight. They're passing them along in the most sincere way possible, but they may not actually know themselves. And while they're credible witnesses, it's just, I leave open that possibility that...
The problem is there are too many of them telling the same story, describing the same vehicle, describing the same bodies. There's too many people making the same error or misinterpreting the same visual cues at whatever location or whatever was going on.
Okay.
There's too many of them, Ian.
Well, you link up with Bill at coasttocoastam.com. The artwork in question up for auction. And good luck with the hypothesis. Look forward to you finishing that work, and I'm sure you'll be popping up again on Coast to Coast.
Well, Coast to Coast has been absolutely wonderful for us. Ian, I've waited years for a chance to have a conversation with you.
Thank you so much.
I love, the whole idea that you're a seminarian and that you had all that religious training. I think it's extremely valuable. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity this evening to spend the evening talking with you.
Glad we covered all the material. Thanks, Bill. God bless you and have a great night, and congratulations on your happy home, too. We'll do the rest of the hour. Open lines next on Coast to Coast AM. In for Art Bell, this is Ian Punnett. Yes, that's my first break. So we know we're kind of in a tight corner here, but we'll get to Mike and Tom on open lines for the rest of this hour. Where are you going to take us? And we'll shoot you all the numbers you need to know coming up after the rejoin in just a second. But Mike is hanging on west of the Rockies on Coast to Coast AM. Just having fun, open lines. Mike, where are you going to take us?
I'm going to take you to an experience that I had on a road in New Jersey. It's pretty infamous. It's called Clinton Road.
Where's Clinton Road? Where's Clinton Road? South or North Jersey?
North Jersey.
Okay.
It's in a town called West Milford.
I know West Milford. My sister-in-law lives not far from there.
Okay, I grew up in Kinnelon.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, the road's known for a lot of witchcraft goes on there. Known for devil worship in the woods. Lots of strange things. Lots of people go there to. There's an albino community that lives there.
What do you mean an albino community? I've never heard of that before.
You never heard of albinos before?
No, I've heard of albinos. I've never heard of them living in a community.
Yeah, they live in a community up in the woods off Clinton Road.
Get out! What are you talking about? I mean, actual how many
well known?
How many albinos are we talking about?
I don't really know how many albinos, but I've had a number of experiences of being chased off that road by albinos. It's a very popular road. Yeah, it's a very popular road for like high school kids. They'll go down that road, and it's something you do like on a bored Wednesday night or something.
Oh, I totally get that.
You know what I mean? So,
but I'm kind of freaking out. I mean, so there's a community in the woods of albinos.
Yeah, it's deep in the woods, and they don't like to be bothered. And if you go on that road, like you can't, like the police will come sometimes. Be like, don't hang out here. Get lost. They don't really like you on that road at all.
Do they have special albino police?
I don't know. The police are a little weird too. It's a little weird, that area, West Milford.
Wait. I'm not letting you off this for a minute. I want to. If anybody else knows about this albino community,
they know about it. I guarantee.
In the woods, that's fine. I just want to hear them. You can call me, and if anybody's listening in the albino community in the woods, I want to know. So anyway, Clinton Road, no particular connection to the president. This is just a road that has a reputation for high strangeness.
Yes, very strange activity. There's a lot of different legends about the road. And
okay.
Anyway, this happened about 10 years ago. I was about 19 years old. I was home for college break. It was one of those Wednesday nights, whatever.
Right.
There was a big bagel place. We used to always go up there. So we'd grab some bagels, and then we'd just let's go to Clinton Road, something to do.
Okay. Watch the weirdos on Clinton Road is what you said.
Exactly,
Good.
Maybe we'll see some albinos. So we're driving down the road, and at that time I was really into UFOs. Like I was always reading like UFO books, and like I was getting into the whole UFO thing. So I'm in the back seat, and with three of my friends, I'm like, this would be a perfect road to see a UFO. You never know, like when you're on a road, you're like, this would be a perfect road to see a UFO.
I totally get it. Yeah,
That's the feeling you get.
I'm highly influenced by the old TV show, The Invaders. Did you ever see that TV show?
No, I never did.
Okay. If you ever get a chance to rent that or something that pops up on it was an old UFO show from the 60s. It's very cool. But anyway, so this is a place where you're expecting to see a UFO.
Or something weird,
Right.
So I'm like,
okay.
It's dark on the road. It's like the road's all bumpy, and since then they've paved it, made it a little bit nicer. But back then it was like real bumpy. Some of it was dirt. It was just like a secluded area. So I'm like, this would be a perfect spot to see a UFO. So I actually said to myself, I'm like, I want to see a UFO. So about 5 minutes later, I look behind me and I see like these 4 lights. I'm like, that's strange. I'm like, what the hell is that? So my friend's like, oh, dude, that's what the people typically say, airplane. I'm like, nah, it's not an airplane, man. That's something weird. And I kept on looking at it, and these 4 lights would be 4 lights, and then they would become 1 light, and then they would go back to 4 lights. I'm like, what the hell is that? And my one friend in the back is like, dude, that is freaking weird. And while we're coming around the bend, all of a sudden, this humongous ship, it must have been about 200 yards, probably long and wide. It was a triangular ship.
Get out.
I'm telling you the truth. It was this triangular ship. It was freaking just hovering above the trees, probably like 40 feet up, and it had made no sound at all, and had all these lights around it.
Right.
And my freaking friends were flipping out. They're like, what the hell is that?
Okay, now I just want to stop in here because I just have to say, having lived in Long Branch for a brief period of my life, and having been a New Jersey resident for a while, I just want to highlight the fact that whereas I'm not sure about the story, I totally believe you're from New Jersey because you can't go a sentence without swearing, and that is a distinct feature I've noticed of New Jersey. I got so used to people swearing on everything, and everybody did. I mean, the policemen were swearing, school teachers were swearing. I was expecting profanity in the sermons. Everybody swears in Jersey.
That's the way we talk.
I know, and you're not. And I appreciate the fact that you tried to round off the sharp edges on that too by using the other F word. So thank you. Very interesting. Well, all right, that gets us started then for open lines. And I want to be clear about this too. When I was talking about high strangeness, I don't mean albinos are strange by any means. I do think it's unusual, however, that they would live in a community in the woods. I have to say I've never heard of that. Anybody back up that part of Mike's story, if not the other part, too? We'll come back to the phones, and we'll see where this takes us. Hang on, Tom, on the first-time caller line, and everybody else will give you the numbers you need next on Coast to Coast AM. In for Art, this is Ian. And I think, we hope, we've been told anyway, crossing our fingers, Art will be back next week, but I will have to go back to my regular show, the pre-show, the early show, and the show we call Coast to Coast Live. It runs on, just a little more than half of the stations that are running this show right now. And we're so glad to be adding new stations along the line all the time. But I just got to get back there because it's hard. I keep falling asleep in church doing the overnight. But it's fun, and thank you again for having me and letting me be a part of this. And by the way, I promised I'd mention it on the air because some people had asked. On Father's Day, I will be preaching at St. Mark's Episcopal Cathedral in Minneapolis. So if you happen to be in town, St. Mark's Episcopal Cathedral, I'll be preaching on Father's Day, and that will be the theme of it, as well as celebrating Native American Amangabo, who is famous in this part of the woods. First-time caller line, Tom, with open lines for the rest of this hour. Tom, where are you going to take us?
How you doing? This is Tom Santonio. Hey, I was just wondering if you or Art or anybody was going to have a show in the near future about shadow people.
It's been a while since we've done a shadow people thing. It was kind of all the rage, and then there was lots of shows on shadow people, and then it just kind of fell off the radar. A particular experience you've had or something?
Yeah, this was about 5 years ago in Ohio, in Youngstown. I was working as a security guard at a television broadcasting station,
mm-hmm.
and I'm sitting there. The room was kind of dark, but in other words, I was watching about 8 monitors, so it was kind of bright inside. And you're sitting there, right behind you, there's a wall, but the wall has an opening in it, maybe 4 by 4. And to the right of that is where the doorway is. And at night, in other words, it's not bright inside, but you can see real well, or very well. Anyway, I don't know. It's kind of like someone would reach in and tap you, and then when you would turn around, there would be no one there.
Now, why would you say shadow? Why would you say shadow person as opposed to a ghost?
Now listen. I think they were trying to get my attention.
About what?
All right, I don't know. To see them.
Why would they want you to see them?
I don't know, because every time you look at them, they go through a portal, whether it's a doorway or some kind of opening. And once they're on the other side, they disappear. It's almost.
Did they ever show?
Pardon me?
Did they ever show up on the monitors?
No,
They never showed up on the on the videotapes. Okay.
No, I don't even know if you'd be able to film it, because it's almost like a cross-hatched area, the shadow itself.
Okay.
And it's like, I don't know, this experience, it happened to me about 5 times.
Well, that sounds really freaky.
Over a period of about a year or 2.
Did you talk to anybody else there that had a similar experience?
No. I asked around, and everybody, they just, no. But my theory is that they're actually time travelers, and that has to do with UFOs, because who knows where they've been? I don't know anybody that's ever sat down and had a discussion with someone.
Okay, well, we'll definitely keep it in mind in the future, Tom, and I'm glad you shared your story on that. Let's get to Bill on the wild card line on Coast to Coast AM. Doing open lines, Bill. Where are you going to take us?
Hi, Ian. Yes, this is Bill in Las Vegas out at McCarran Airport, watching the jets land and listening to you all, one of my favorite programs. It's such a pleasure to talk with you.
Well, thank you, Bill. Everybody landing okay tonight? Bill? No! What happened to Bill? Oh, something happened technically. Bill, call back. Something happened on this end. Kyrus trying to play another Olivia Newton-John record or something. Made some mistake, hit some button. We'll promise to get you back on the air as soon as possible. So, Bill, if you can call back, we'll do it. If not, we'll get to everybody else who's hanging on. Sorry about that, Bill. We want you next on Coast to Coast AM. In for Art, this is Ian Punnett. Again, our apologies, Bill. That was on our end. It was just a technical thing. One button got pushed, but call back so we can get you back on. Sorry about that. Wildcard line, John on open lines on Coast to Coast AM. John, where are you going to take us?
Hey, Ian.
Hey.
I want to talk about a UFO I saw out here. It was kind of like a meteor, only it was bigger.
Okay, where were you?
I'm in Columbus.
Well, I'm sorry?
I'm in Ohio.
Okay, and so you saw it, and did anybody else see it with you?
Huh? No, I think I was the only one, because I haven't heard anybody talking about it. I've never heard anybody talk about it other than me.
How long ago was this?
I'd say a couple months.
Okay, and so this is something that's fairly recent, and you just saw it streaking across the sky. Did you see it land?
Huh? No, I didn't see it land. I saw it disappear behind a cloud. I didn't see anything fragment off of it or anything.
Okay, it sounds like you got birds behind you. Are those nature's birds, or are you a bird collector?
No, it's I'm outside right now.
Wow, they're loud.
I'm standing outside looking up.
Yeah. So no activity then again tonight?
I haven't seen anything real recently other than that.
All right. Well, John, let us know whether anybody else confirms what you saw. And I would ask around, call the local police, see whether anybody else called something in. And thanks for joining the conversation. Let's go east of the Rockies. Lee is on Coast to Coast AM. Open lines, Lee. Where are you going to take us?
Hey, I'm out in Minneapolis. You're coming out here, I heard, something like that?
I live here.
In Minneapolis?
Well, I live in St. Paul. So I live on...
Well, maybe you've heard about this. I don't know. I've never heard anyone else talk about it. It's kind of like that other kid there. But, I showed about 25 or 30 people that were witnesses to it. But anyway, the story is, I had a room. I was in a group home, so there were a lot of people there, people that worked there and people that lived there. And in this room, I could sit in my windowsill and look out my window down towards downtown Minneapolis, and I would do this all the time. I'd stay up late and look out at the sky over Minneapolis. And I see these lights that are kind of like planes, except that they're moving way too fast to be planes, and they're going in and out of the buildings. Like they're low enough that they're flying, below the tops of the buildings and in between them and whatnot. And there's probably like 24 of them. They're making sharp turns that would just crush a human being at the speeds that they were going, and they would seem to chase each other. So I woke up a whole bunch of people and got the staff that were working there at the time, brought them all into my room, and I showed them, and we sat and watched them for a while. We never could figure out what they were. So did you ever hear about that?
No, I haven't heard anything about this.
See, I would have thought that I would have heard something, but the next day we never saw anything in the paper. I would have thought that, hundreds of people would have seen that. Because
well, that's, somebody's got to make the call and get the ball rolling. And so what facility was this? You'd wake up the staff? What do you mean by that?
No, the staff worked there. They had overnight staff. There was a bunch of us kids that lived there. I was a teenager back then.
Okay.
And it was nighttime, and everybody else was asleep, but I never did sleep very well back then, so I'd just sit in the windowsill and look out the window. And I saw, and, I could see Minneapolis out one side, and then if you look through the hallway on the other side, you can see downtown St. Paul.
Right.
Except for there were a few more trees, so you couldn't really see that as well. But you could see downtown Minneapolis real well from my window.
Well, next time that happens, you got to call it in right away so that other people can go out looking for it and try to confirm, see what you're seeing. Call Coast to Coast if it happens again and get through and just say it's going on right now so that people can even get in their cars. A lot of people around the Twin Cities listening to this show, and they would get over there and people would be able to get cameras and be able to kind of verify it. So next time, don't be stingy with the info. Call the police, too, and get it on the record. I appreciate you bringing it to our attention. And Bill is back from the wild card line from a few minutes ago. Hey, Bill.
Hi, how you doing?
Kiris sends his apologies for that.
Oh, Kiris. Okay, and Gina was really sweet too. I love all you guys. You're just super. I had a question and a comment. First of all, the question was your previous guest had mentioned something about evolution, and I'm going, evolution? Oh, by the way, that reminds me about the Darwinian rewards. So was Art still doing that, or is that just kind of something that's faded out, the Darwinian awards?
The Darwin Awards.
Awards, okay.
The Darwin Awards, right. They float around the Internet, and, when they come out, we read them on the air. Sure.
Okay. And the other thing was, yes, I can substantiate those triangular craft. I have seen one big one out here one time, and it was through binoculars. You wouldn't have been able to see it if you didn't have some fairly large binoculars. This thing must have been 1,000 feet on a side,
really?
A triangle, and I was just transfixed on this thing. I was holding my breath. It was gliding so smoothly, just like a wave ripples on a smooth pond. It was just moving very smoothly like that. No jerkiness at all. Just absolutely smoothly. And it took a bank out towards Nellis and went out that way. I followed it for about 30 seconds. It was amazing to watch this thing.
Now, do jets scramble when something like that happens?
Well, according to George, it's something that's actually related to the Air Force, that they are our craft, but this technology is way beyond anything that's ever been publicized. Pardon?
I get the flying wing, and I know that we were developing flying wing aircraft, and that was secret for a period of time, and that might have been something that somebody would have thought was a UFO. But, I mean, I'm thinking, I mean, if it's something that large, does that really sound like one of ours? I mean, you're talking 1,000 feet, didn't you say?
It was, I would say, just kind of guesstimating by the size of the Stratosphere Tower, because it was about that wide on one side, one of the triangular craft. Each side was probably as long as the Stratosphere Tower is high. And this thing was just gliding through the sky so smoothly. It was probably about a mile up. And I happened to be at a dark sky location looking with my binoculars at the stars, as I love to do, and this thing crossed the path of my binos, and I just kept following it. And it took a turn north. First it was heading east, and then it took a turn north. I watched it for about 30, 45 seconds in my binos, and at each apex of the triangle, at each vertex, rather, at the corners, there were little tiny lights. You wouldn't have been able to see them if you didn't have the binoculars, but you could see them really clearly. And so you had a triangular craft that was just floating out here. And it's not the first time I've seen anything like that out here. There have been others, but this was by far the largest.
Well, it's interesting that you say that there were no jets scrambled, because we would hope that, especially in these times of heightened security, that if something that big were floating so visibly, that there would be some indication that if it wasn't something that we were creating, that we would be very interested in investigating it firsthand. So I guess maybe that's the good news of it, is that it must be ours. Or either that or our defense systems are even worse than any of us want to imagine. And I certainly hope that's not the case. So thank you, Bill. Appreciate you. Glad you got through again so you could tell that story and finish up so that we can get to west of the Rockies, where Larry is standing by on Coast to Coast AM. Go ahead, Larry.
Good morning, Ian. I have something of significance to talk to you about, but I just have to say about that that caller from New Jersey. That guy was so full of it.
There are no community of
that road. He talked about that road being a place where there's lots of witchcraft going on. How could he possibly know that? I mean, you know what I mean?
Reputation.
How does he know there's lots of witchcraft going on, and what does that even mean?
Well, I guess it could mean this. Like when I was growing up, there was a certain bridge near my house where, for whatever reason, whether they were real Wicca or not, I don't know, but somebody had painted, a pentangle inside of a circle, and there was indication that some type of animal sacrifice or some sort of ritual had taken place there. And the reputation got around so fast. Everybody would get on their bikes and dare to go over and see the witch bridge. So, I mean, in that sense, it's got to be rumors, I'm sure, but enough that, when he went there, he was expecting to see a UFO, he says, and he saw one. Now, the idea of the albinos in the woods, that part, I have a hard time
Not
with
one thing he said was substantiated. His evidence for the albinos in the woods was, well, they chased me off. It could be just a guy with blonde hair.
Right.
You know?
Well, it could just be one guy who's an albino who just says, "These people would stop bugging me." I can totally get that. So.
Okay, yeah. What I called about is I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's been a series of articles in Stars and Stripes magazine about servicemen and women that have been killed in Iraq and Afghanistan that are unable to get their religion noted on their tombstone because they're pagans or witches.
I've heard about that.
If you're a Christian, you know how if you're a Christian, you get a cross, and you're Jewish, you get a Star David. But pagans can't get the pentagram.
Right.
Even though a whole number of religions have had their symbols validated by the military and are currently in use, such as the atom for the atheist. But the pagan pentagram has not been. It's not allowed, and the pagans have been petitioning for years, and they just leave it blank on the tombstone.
I have to say, I don't see how in this day of careful pluralism, where government, in the interests of trying to make sure that no religions can be discussed, have gone out of their way. They have, certainly with the chaplaincy corps, to go out of their way to be inclusive to everybody, so that it doesn't just get wiped out by some court that nothing can be put on a tombstone, or the government can't say anything to anybody. So I think it's a bad idea for them, frankly, to do that. And I read about that just the other day, and I was surprised because it doesn't seem to be a good strategy.
Maybe you should do a show on this, because if there gets to be some mainstream public attention on it, I bet they'll make a decision really soon.
Well, there's been a lot of mainstream articles about that. There's been quite a few, actually, but I would look at that. I mean, other than I don't think it's right, I don't know what more could be said, but I appreciate that. And let me just get to one other. I think we have time for Bruce on the wild card line. Is Bruce still there? We have time for Bruce on Coast to Coast AM.
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead.
I'm going to take us to the mountains of New Jersey, but first a little bit of advice. If you're going to be preaching, that's not the time to fall asleep in church.
No, that's why I will not be doing the overnight before I go into
You don't want to bring sleep to the sleepless.
There you go.
Anyway, I grew up in New Jersey. I live in L.A. now, unfortunately, but there is a community up in the mountains of New Jersey called the Jackson Whites.
Really?
Have you heard of them?
These are could this be the albino community?
Well, possibly, only in the sense that there really is this group called the Jackson Whites. They've been there for generations. I think they're actually remnants of the colonial days.
Well, I'll have to leave it there for now because our time's running out, but that's more of a clue than I had a half an hour ago, so that gives me something to start researching when I get off the air. I look forward to continuing that conversation next week on Coast to Coast Live. You'll hear it as the early show, 4 hours before Coast to Coast AM. And thank you so much for everybody who called in and participated in the last hour. Sorry to strand anybody. And look forward to catching Ross Mitchell. He'll be filling in, I'm sure, sometime soon on Coast to Coast AM. In for Art, Deus Te Amat. And